Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining us and welcome to today's webinar, 10 Weeks to Better Camp Marketing. This is part 1 of our 10-part series, and I promise we're going to keep all of these short and break them down step by step so that these webinars are easy for you to attend and just take a few minutes out of your day to learn how to really up your marketing game. Before we get started with today's content, I just wanted to familiarize everyone really quickly with the features of this webinar, just in case it's your first time joining us today. Over on the left-hand side, we have a great resource list for you today. There are lots and lots of different downloads and pieces of collateral that will supplement the content that we're talking about in today's webinar. So have a look through those. One thing I'll call out is you can actually pre-register for part 2, which is awesome. So you don't even have to wait for that email invitation to come in. If you like what you're hearing today, go ahead and sign up for the second piece. The next thing is that we are going to be on Q&A the entire time. I've got some of my colleagues online with me. So if you have any questions that come up, feel free to type to us and we will type a response back to you. At the end, we should have a few minutes of time too for any additional questions. And if we don't happen to answer your question during today's webinar, don't worry, we'll get back to you by email. And then the last thing is the content we'll be viewing in today's presentation is going to be available in the slides area. That's the largest rectangle on your screen there. If you want to resize that and make it a little bit bigger, go ahead and use your mouse to tug at the bottom right-hand corner of that rectangle, and you'll be able to see the screen. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce myself, and we'll go ahead and get started. So if we haven't met before, and maybe we have because I do host a lot of these things, I'm Cameron and I work for our digital marketing consulting team. And what that means is we actually don't do any marketing for Active itself as a company. We are entirely dedicated to helping you with your marketing. So we can consult on a number of areas and topics, whether that's Facebook and Google advertising, or engagement calendars and setting up your marketing for the whole year, search engine optimization, and optimizing for getting found on the web, all kinds of stuff. I have a particular interest in consumer psychology and behavior as well. And as you can see, because I've got 3 kiddos of my own, I'm super passionate about what I do and keeping kids busy. I'm a happier mom and my kids are happier if they've got stuff to do and we're getting everyone out of the house and keeping active. So thank you to everyone for joining today for all that you do for our kiddos. So as I just mentioned, we only work with active customers. And what I tend to run into, what our team tends to run into, is 2 different types of customers. They fall into sort of these 2 different buckets. Sometimes we'll be onboarding or working with a new customer and they'll tell us, you know, our marketing plan is really solid, we feel really tech savvy, we want to just increase our paid ad spend and get into remarketing. They know all of the big fancy marketing terms and are up, like I said, with all of the technical know-how like the Facebook pixels, Google Tag Manager, and all that sort of thing. Then, in the other hand, we have some directors or registrars who say, you know what, we don't have a budget, we hardly do any paid advertising or any advertising at all. We don't know how we can keep up with the competition because everything has gotten so savvy these days. Marketing has really changed. And what I would say to either of these individuals is that there is probably room for growth and learning. Today we're going to be talking about more of a back-to-basics approach to marketing and making sure we're really shoring up the things that are most important to consumers. The other thing I would say, especially to the person on the right here, is that you might not realize how much creativity and license you have with so many of the free online marketing tools, aside from advertising, that are going to serve you really well and help build you a really loyal and engaged audience. So that's really what we're going to be talking about today, and I'm going to baseline all of this information in some of the really cool research that we've done. We love doing surveys. I love presenting with surveys because I think data needs to help tell the story, but we have a lot of consumer research, and I'm going to be sharing those results with you and helping you identify really what's important to consumers. And why all of this is so important, why I'm so happy you're here, is because of how much marketing really has changed. We found a statistic that said that we're exposed to an incredible 40,000 consumer commercial messages per day. And I kind of liken it to what it is like walking through Tokyo, or what it must be like to walk through Times Square. When you think about all of those billboards, all of those inputs coming in at you all at once, it's almost hard to really know where to look or know where to focus, or to understand if what it is that you're putting out there, that message, is being absorbed. And so that's why, again, I wanted to make today about going back to the things that consumers really do focus on. What are those inputs that they're really listening to? And how can we take our consumers who are currently not passive consumers of advertising information, and help engage them more in that buying process? And how do we use technology to do that? So going back to talking about my example of our two different types of program organizers, the one who's really technically savvy and the one who feels like they might need a little bit more help, one of the first things I encourage everyone to do is really examine and do this kind of drill, like think about as a bucket, and really examining if your bucket's leaking. So there's three different sort of components that I see in this process. And one is thinking about inbound versus outbound marketing. So if you're entirely focused on, and a lot of people are, on outbound strategies, which is going after customers who maybe aren't, pursuing or looking for you, but you're ignoring those customers or not serving those customers as well as you could be, who are already coming into you, who are coming into your website, who are engaged with your Facebook page, who are watching your videos, downloading your brochures, things like that, then your bucket could be leaking. If you are also placing so much emphasis on paid search, so paid advertising, maybe that's magazine ads, that could be Facebook ads, Google advertising, whatever, versus organic, which is your word of mouth traffic, which is people coming to you or finding you via your social page, people who find you because they're doing a search on the web and they're looking for camps or programs. Are they able to find you at the top of the stack when they get to those Google results? If you're not focused on the organic side enough, then again, your bucket could be leaking. You could be losing revenue and prospects, that you, and even existing customers, if you're not paying attention to that end of your marketing plan. And then lastly, I wanted to say a word too about prioritizing or looking for existing versus new. So a lot of people tend to really focus and give the best results, the best discounts to their new or their first-time customers. And while there can be some value doing that, I think in the type of industry that we're in, it pays so much dividend to focus on those existing customers, really cultivating those relationships and making sure that those families are coming back year over year or season over season to participate in more programs with us. If we're not doing that, then our bucket could be leaking too. We could be losing existing customers and missing a big chance to leverage those existing customers into helping us find and create new customers as well. And that's probably the biggest bit and the most important reason that we do this. So this brings us to getting our survey data involved here. And what we did is we conducted a survey of over 900 parents all across the country, all different ages. We got both male and female participants involved in this study, and we asked them a number of questions about not only how they find and research and what camps and activities for their kids, but what is most important to them when they're making those considerations and then ultimately deciding where they want to send their child and invest their money. So the first question we asked them is, how do they generally hear about camps and activities? And what's interesting is that so many people really rely on school, and they rely on word of mouth, and then also hearing about it from their child. So those are our three main categories, as you can see, in terms of responses, what is most prevalent. So all parents leverage friends and then influencers, their primary influencer being their child, in the search process. And then it's really important, if you are not already cultivating the school relationships, to see if you can do something about that. Because as you can see, the majority of parents still really are learning about these things through the schools or through their child, who obviously is attending school and receiving those messages there as well. This next graph shows where or what parents have done to learn about camps and activities. So as you can see here, the three most common responses in the lime green, the dark gray, and that sort of blue-gray are as follows. So they've asked friends, they have done an online search, and then they've also talked to teachers, coaches, and youth leaders. So as you can see, of those three things, really the only one that is in your control where you're participating in that messaging is in the online search process, and that's if they get to your website. What they will see first is probably going to be lots of online reviews. They might see some information about you on in Google My Business. So there are multiple things they could stumble across in that online search process as well before even arriving on your page. So what we want to emphasize here is that creating that strong word of mouth to be the first thing that comes to mind when someone asks, hey, where are you sending your kids for camp this summer? Or what kinds of programs and activities do you have set up for your kids this summer? You want to be that person that gets talked about consumer to consumer. Now, another thing that we found interesting and that the data informed us about in our survey is that behavior really varied by age also when it came to when people started looking for programs for their kids. And what you'll see here is that parents belonging to that 45 and up group were really well planned and thought very far in advance, 1 to 3 months and even earlier than 3 months before a program started when they thought about enrollment. And you can see even that those Gen X parents, they are also pretty thoughtful in that consideration process and when they start planning. Whereas millennials, you can see it's a little bit surprising, but the majority of them said that they wait 2 to 4 weeks before a program starts before they start looking for another one. Now, there could be some different factors that we have to also take into account here, such as the age of the program or the age of the children that are engaged in that program or activity. Also, the price point. So generally speaking, the higher the price point, the earlier folks start looking for those programs. But some key takeaways here is really in terms of nurturing and how you plan and structure your marketing calendar. So very often what we see with our customers is that camps start to market to customers to buy before they really are ready to engage in that buying process. And when we do that, they just start to tune us out. So we need to be priming them a little bit and making posts and creating content, sending out emails, things like that, that are really focused on, customer retention and engagement and promoting that goodwill with the customer, not necessarily asking them to make a buying decision at this point. So that's just something to consider when we are planning, that we don't want to hit buyers too far ahead before they are ready to open up those wallets. Let's get them in that friendly type mood and ready for it when they actually are ready to put their money down. I showed on a previous slide how common it is that parents hear about or first time exposed to hearing about your programs, not only through school but through their child. And you can see here what this graph is showing is just how important children are in that whole overall buying process. So we asked parents, what are the 3 most important factors when choosing a program? And you can see here that 95% of them responded that their child's interest is most important when choosing a program. And this is true across all parent ages, across genders, income brackets. These factors remain pretty constant. Yes, price is a second consideration, and then after that, character development, so life learning skills, leadership qualities, things like that. But if you look, what we really want to do is think about and focus more on child engagement and getting these kids interested. Oftentimes, it's not a choice really between you and another program, or maybe it's not, but between you and sitting on the couch and staying at home and playing Xbox all day long. So as marketers and as program organizers, we really need to be doing a lot to help parents interest their children and speaking and messaging to those kids directly too, because kids have so much agency today in the decision-making process and in what they do. So this, I think, is a super important statistic to remember and something that we should be building around when we're designing our marketing materials and crafting our message about what is our value and why it's a good idea to send children or send participants to come and join your programs. After kids, we wanted to find out from consumers too, what are their most important influences when it comes to deciding upon a program? And here's a hint, it's not you, and it's not the marketing materials that you put out that are the most important things. Today's consumers are so interested or so much more convinced and invested in what we know as user-generated content. And user-generated content can take many different forms. It can be an actual testimonial, it can be survey data that gets published, and of course it can be things like online reviews, video testimonials, all of those things, and even of course word of mouth, just your basic standard having conversations with real actual people that they know. And what you can see here is interesting and very reflective of that. We found in our survey that even above their friends, which came in second place, friend referrals, teachers, coaches, youth leaders, people who parents consider to be experts or thought leaders as far as child care goes or child development, they are the most influential people that you can kind of get involved with or work with other than the person's child. So really look to develop those relationships there where it's pertinent in your market. So if you run tennis programs, for example, how can you network with other tennis coaches and tennis professionals in the area who would be influential to parents or consumers? We talked about friend referrals, which of course that's something that we just wanted to validate, knowing that so many parents talk to one another when making these decisions. But interestingly, we found that next was online reviews. And this is something that we think needs to get a little bit more attention. When we work with our customers, we want to make sure that your online reviews not only are positive, but also that they're updated frequently and that they're being responded to, whether the feedback is good or poor. You want to make sure that you are engaging with the audience in that manner, because that can help drive some of the decision making too. So you can see that in fourth position that's the first time we get to content that you actually drive. That might be newsletters, your social channels, or even email. So really try to think about and focus on what are the ways that you can get to those influencers up at the top of our stack rank here. We also asked parents what it is that they do to learn more about programs and activities, and I found these results so fascinating too, especially with younger parents. You can see over here on the left, this is the 18 to 29 demographic. So many of them, over 70%, have followed the social account of a children's activity or program organizer that they're interested in. And even about 60% of them, almost 60% of them, have joined some kind of a closed parent Facebook group, which is a tremendous number, and one that we even see climbing in the 30 to 44-year-old age demographic. So what we find interesting about this too is that older parents are still more likely to do things like attend an open house or actually go to a physical location to learn more about programs. So I think one of the call outs here is maybe think of ways that you can combine and leverage that, right? We have more and more camps and programs that we work with conducting virtual open houses over Facebook, where they get counselors involved and hopefully even past campers or program participants. And that's a great way to leverage and sort of invest, all of your different audience types by preference. But think about too what this means, this movement towards social for your older campers or program participants, and for counselors and staff and things like that too. It's a great way to keep them engaged as well, and they also obviously can evangelize and become some of your best customers and best, most loyal people when it comes to driving more new customers back into your programs. Continuing with that social theme, and this probably is not breaking news for anybody, but just to validate, we find that women are generally more social when it comes to participating in online social media than their male counterparts. So as you can see here, women are more likely to do those things that we mentioned, joining a closed Facebook group, belonging to an organization, and also following those social accounts to learn more about their children's activities and programs. So no surprise there, and men are slightly more likely to engage with your newsletters and email and receiving that content instead. That's that orange bar that you see on the graph here. So because we're so interested in getting that UGC, that user-generated content, we wanted to know what is it that parents are likely to participate in terms of helping us create that user-generated content. And so interestingly, we find that everybody is pretty likely to recommend a program that they or their child has enjoyed. We found that, they gave that an 8 out of 10 in terms of the likelihood to do that. Where we have to nudge them a little more is in terms of writing a review, but that's important because reviews can be so powerful in that search and decision process. And what I found interesting too is we tend to think of most people as leaving reviews or reacting when they've had a negative experience, but it is still more likely, according to our poll, that they're going to share positive experiences about you and your programs on social, which is really heartening for us to hear as marketers. Something else that they're fairly likely to do is write a survey, or complete a survey rather. And those survey results can be used in so many different ways, and in terms of giving actual quantitative data to your marketing and to the claims that you're making, surveys can be super important. And we'll talk more about surveys when we talk about our strategy for marketing in our upcoming webinars. So now as we come into the conclusion of our webinar, I wanted to quickly ask if anyone out there is interested in learning more about our CAMARIN Class Manager software or even our digital marketing services and how our software can be customized for your organization. So if that's something that you'd like to learn more about, go ahead and click that button and let us know. Otherwise, you can click anywhere outside of that box to dismiss that notification. Well, we like to keep these things short and snappy, so this is the end of today's webinar, but it really is just the beginning of this webinar series. And in our next webinars, we're going to be talking about some of the strategies that you can use to do exactly what we've just described here, so to leverage those customer relationships, to create more of that user-generated content. And what we're going to look at is how to nail search engine optimization and really get found, which we know online search is one of those key things that most consumers do when they're trying to learn more about you. So join us for that. You can actually pre-register for that webinar over on the left-hand side. But I hope from today you've learned more about your customers, what matters to them, what drives and influences their decision-making the most, and what you need to be focusing on as marketers in terms of developing more of that user-generated content. So thanks again for joining us. Please pre-register, and we hope to see you next time. We'll stay on for a few more minutes for Q&A, and again, just feel free to type in the Q&A widget to us, and we'll be answering your questions. Thanks, and have a great day.